don't come in as a blank slate, because I see past lives or parallel lives, whatever you want to call them, every day. We come in with residual energy and patterning, whatever lessons or learnings we gained in that lifetime, we may want to grow further or take to the next level in this lifetime.
Hey, what's up, y'all? John Locke once said that we're born as blank slates. No memory, no influences, just pure potential. But what if he's wrong? What if the relationships you have right now, the fears that you carry, even the opportunities that come your way are being shaped by past lives you've already lived? Today, I sit down with Betsy Granville, a Brown University grad, about how these past incarnations may be influencing your reality right now and how understanding them could change everything. If this conversation like this lights you up, join me at the Awakened Leaders Summit on September 17th in Baltimore. All the details are at traydowns.com. Sign up and join us today. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.
Betsy, my friend, thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out with me today on this platform. I'm very excited to spread your message, to talk about your story and share your gift. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sure. So I have a little bit of a competitive edge, I guess, because I have it like insider into who Betsy is. A mutual friend of ours has told me a lot about your journey. And I'm very curious to ask some, I've listened to a couple of podcasts. I'm just really curious to go down that road of your background, how you came to be a psychic medium. And just looking at your website, you also do channelings. And I had the pleasure of having a firsthand account of your spiritual animal communication, which was very cathartic for me and my wife after losing our dog, Gracie. But yeah, Betsy, how does a Brown graduate teacher for X amount of years become a psychic medium?
That's a good question. I guess start way back. I was a super intuitive, sensitive child. That was not always the easiest situation for those out there listening who are sensitive. But the flip side of that, sensitivity is tremendous empathy and subtle sense abilities, which we're all equipped with as spiritual beings in a physical form. So I was living a pretty normal life, was a mom of 2 kids, and I put those kind of abilities to the side for most of my adult life. And then when my kids got older, I think I finally saw that there was some space for something else emerging in my life. And I didn't know what that was. But my daughter was reading one day. I came into a room. I was sharing a spiritual tidbit as usual. And she said, "Mom, is this really what you really want to do? Because it's what you're always talking about." And in that moment, she reflected back for me this other side of me. I'd always loved kids. I'd been really focused as a mom. I'd been a teacher, as you said. I volunteered in my kids' classrooms. But my other love was spirituality. And when she asked that question, I sort of said yes in the moment. To what? I didn't know, but things really opened up from there. And the abilities that I'd had to see things and to know things just blossomed in an even bigger way, seemingly overnight. And I always say spirit loves a volunteer. So I said, if I can be a blessing, put me in. And they did. So that was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I started doing this through word of mouth. And I've been doing it every day, several times a day since.
Did they teach this class at Brown University?
They did not. But I did study comparative religion and Eastern spirituality at Brown. So I was already on this track in some way.
Sure, the fast track to spirituality. So how did you know what you were experiencing? I guess maybe did you have these abilities when you were younger? Like, how did you know? Did you see people that weren't necessarily in other people's realities? How did you know that this was like the world of psychic mediumship?
Yeah, I really didn't. I just experienced those sensitivities as like being too sensitive. That was the label as a kid. And I didn't really know what to do with that. But I did have a really clear sense about people, about patterns, dynamics in a given room or relationship, or I know things before they happened. And I would say after the birth of my children, I also saw an increase in those abilities. So my husband, Dave, would come home from work and I'd know everything he was going to say before he said it. And I would just be confused. I'd say, didn't you just say all of that? But I really was so focused on raising my kids that I wasn't, bringing these abilities to the fore. I kept them to the side. But I was always drawn. I was doing, month-long Buddhist meditation retreats in college. I was, studying spirituality and English writing and then teaching. So I was always reading about spirituality. I was always drawn. So I think the books we're reading, what we're interested in, it's always a sign about where we're headed or what we're meant to do. And I think at a certain point, it was just time to be of service in this way.
Sure. So, have you ever seen in your reality, like people that aren't necessarily visible to everyone else? Like, I'm just always fascinated by what people experience subjectively. So I always wonder, like, if psychic mediums, I mean, you get you have the sensitivities, right? You're using your intuition to receive guidance or messages from the other side for other people or yourself. But have you ever looked up from your laptop while working and seeing someone that is totally outside the norm of, that should be there? I mean, I've read stories of psychics who have gotten out of the shower and walked down the hall to go get dressed. And there's like Native Americans standing in the adjacent room facing them, sending them messages. And it's like, I don't know how I would react if I got out of the shower and was drying off and there's a Native American man standing there, like looking at me, trying to give me a message. I think I would freak out. But have you ever experienced something similar?
That's called objective clairvoyance. It's seeing a really clear picture outside of yourself. And I don't experience the non-physical world in that way. In fact, I don't know any psychic mediums who do, and they exist, but I would say it's pretty rare. And I think sometimes for those who I've heard speak, it's not always the most helpful way of experiencing the non-physical, because yes, you can say what someone looked like or at one point in their life or however they're showing up to you, but you have to be able to receive using all the clairs, all the subtle senses to be most effective and most helpful. So spirit will show me certain characteristics, like maybe it's like a big belly or it's a bald head or, something like that, physical characteristics that are slouched, a curved spine, things that are distinctive that the person who I'm speaking with here in the physical can relate to or understand. But the physical characteristics are in many ways the least important. Those change over our lives. And what's more significant is to be able to receive in terms of physical, personality, memories, messages, certain symbols, things that are significant for someone. Like I'm thinking of someone who I read for, and the first thing her dad in spirit showed me was this really heavy hand, and I said, "There's a super heavy hand," and he's just slapping it right down here on my desk, and she said, "I have a statue of a hand and arm that was my dad's that's on my desk right here." So spirit will find ways to validate their presence for people and get that through. That saying someone had a beard and blue eyes and was 6 foot tall is not necessarily the most helpful way. So, but I have had, it's funny you say Native Americans, because I have had experiences of the presence of spirit. I have this experience of the presence of spirit every day when I'm doing sessions, but in my waking reality, I also have that experience. So one time I was in Wyoming, where my family goes, and I'd been taking a lot of long walks, which I love to do on the mesas. And I had been connecting with the Native American spirits in that area. And when I came home to Virginia, I was sitting at the kitchen island, and all of a sudden, maybe I was eating lunch and I smelled smoke. And I got up, I looked out, the windows, opened the door, went in the other room. Nowhere else was there the smell of smoke. I hadn't been, like using the stove, that kind of thing. And then I started to see and just know through that's called claircognizance, clear knowing, that there was a Native American spirit there with me in the kitchen. And so then I asked him, tell me about yourself and tell me about the messages you want to share. And so because I'd been engaging and reaching out to those spirits while I was in that place, he had sort of, followed me home. There's no actual physical distance or time or space for spirit, but he had come to finish the conversation and answer those questions. So I experience it more as a presence, or sometimes after a session, if something comes through, I'm writing an email to someone to send like the recording, then as I'm consciously, engaging or making the intention, I think the intention is so critical to connect with this person here, that their loved one or whoever is the angel or the guide who's connected them will come in and start informing what I write. So I can feel when that happens, and I can step back and realize that wasn't just Betsy typing or writing. That was a higher intelligence coming through.
Mm. So what you're describing to me is what I've heard in the lexicon as the hitchhiker effect, where you experience a phenomenon and then you bring it home essentially. It sounds like your experience was positive, but there have been negative experiences associated with that effect. How do you protect yourself from that, right? Like if I go out in nature and I'm like speaking to the spirits that may be associated with that land, or if I'm doing meditation and connecting with something at a location that I deem safe or as a container that I want to, participate in that experience. But I don't want to bring that necessarily home with me, right? So how do you protect yourself in those events that you don't really necessarily bring something negative with that hitchhiker effect?
I don't think of it as protection. I mean, I think that implies a polarity, implies good and bad. I just make the intention every day to connect with the light and only the light for the best and highest of, be it myself or the person who I'm working with, and all concerned. And that's a boundary. And with that intention, with that clear boundary, I just have never experienced anything negative, anything dark, anything scary. I just don't go there. And that's all I can tell you about that. It's just never been my experience. Like you, I've heard other people talk about it, but it's not my reality.
Sure. But I think sometimes, we deem it as negative because it's so outside the scope of our definition of reality. Like things happen, things move, things slam, maybe violently. And then we're like, holy crap, what was that? It scared the crap out of me. And then it's negative, right? But necessarily it's just a movement of energy, and maybe it is something trying to communicate with us, but I don't know why we automatically deem it as negative. Maybe it's just because it scares us so much that it's an existential shock or ontological shock that we're not ready for or developed to really view objectively. If that makes sense.
I think anytime something's unfamiliar, we don't have a context to put it in, or we don't understand it, we are, base instinct tends to be fear. So I've worked with lots of people who have been, who've come to me and said, I've had this scary or this negative or this dark experience. And when we explore it, as you said, it's really not objectively dark, negative, or scary. It's just unfamiliar, and they haven't known how to process it.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard you use the word spirit, and I've heard a lot of mediums use the word spirit. So I'm curious, like, how do you define the word spirit?
I think of us as I said at the beginning, both having a physical aspect and a non-physical aspect, a human aspect and a being or a spirit aspect. We are physical beings in the physical body mind. As such, we have the associated 5 physical senses. We're also the spirit, the consciousness, the energy that animates the physical body mind. And as such, we're all equipped with, to one extent or another, that equivalent of the 5 physical senses in the non-physical or energetic senses. Those are the clairs. Those are ways of receiving or perceiving information and different frequencies of vibrations of information through our subtle bodies. So we're not spirit isn't something out there. It's not in a different place. It's not something other than us. It's who we are in our essence. The only difference between us and our loved ones in spirit, for example, is that we're still in the physical body and they have shed it. But that eternal consciousness that animates the physical body, or our pets for that matter, is eternal and is what survives physical death. So spirit to me is the non-physical, and I expand into my non-physical aspect to connect with the larger non-physical aspect, the one web of consciousness, to receive and perceive information and impressions, to bring those through to those here in the physical. But there is no other place to go, and spirit isn't something other than us. It's our very essence. So when we're in touch with that aspect of ourselves, it's a pretty easy half jump or leap into that aspect of ourselves.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. I just hear mediums say spirit is telling me this, spirit is telling me that. And, it's just a word really, but I always wonder if it's something different for everyone. Same way that I use consciousness, right? Like, or, a word that is associated with a non-physical aspect of ourselves that has access to information, all time, all space, all dimensional information that we can tap into. Now, I wonder what your thoughts on this. Like, do you think that, and I've asked this question, it's not very popular, especially with my wife, right? Do you think you're actually tapping into like our past loved ones, like their actual sentience, their actual sovereignty? Or do you think you're tapping into like the deep psyche states or unconscious of us and being able to see our connection with a loved one and bring that evidence through to say, all right, this is what I'm seeing, and this is what needs to be communicated to you. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think I understand what you're asking. Feel free to jump in if you need to add more to direct the answer. But my sense is that when there's a soul aspect and essence of all of us, which is that eternal aspect. When we're here in the physical, we take on the personality, the physical body, the human aspect, and we have a story. That story is comprised of our history, our memories, our name, our wishes, our desires, our life experiences, our relationships. That's the story of Betsy or Trey. And when I connect with those in the non-physical loved ones, and spirit includes guides, angels, master teachers, loved ones, many levels of and dimensions of intelligence and consciousness. But I am there's an eternal aspect to that spirit with whom I'm connecting. And there's also the ability, and it's kind of what they occupy, or their spirit body in non-physical. But they can also drop back into the aspect of themselves, which was the story of them here. And that part of them can relay, the physical characteristics, the memories, the significant pieces and details that their loved one here in physical life would understand, that they want to convey. So I think that just like for us here, there are different dimensions and aspects of our being. We're soul. We can't fit that entire soul into this little physical body. So we're always operating at multiple levels. We're operating at the soul aspect, the higher self, the superior self, we could say, and the physical self, the personality, the body, mind. In a way, the non-physical is not totally dissimilar, where they are embodying the non-physical more clearly, but they can tap into this aspect of self, which has all of these accoutrements of body and mind, or history and story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
And that's how they can bring through that information that we're tapping into.
Sure. It's always fascinated me that how can an evidential medium be so evidential, right? Like, is it an actual, like, do we have sovereign, like a sentient sovereign being on the other side that grows and evolves independently on its own, or is it them connecting with that web, right, and then reading and downloading our background, our experience thus far, and just bringing forth like different files and reading them to us to kind of convey? I don't know. I mean, both can be very impactful to someone's reality. I mean, even if, let's say, I mean, me personally, I like to think that our loved ones don't just like wander, follow us around and like watch us all day. Like they're out somewhere evolving, continuously, and that they're doing their own thing and living a different life, or maybe an existence, and to evolve their consciousness, or maybe going back to that oneness state. I prefer that than to think that they're just over my shoulder, but time is different in the non-physical. What I'm told, I don't remember that, but when I'm in deep meditative states, time is dialed to where I can be in a meditation for 5 minutes, or I shouldn't say 5 minutes. It feels like 5 minutes, but it actually turns out to be an hour, right?
Mhm.
So here, maybe it's totally different. Maybe they are with us all the time. It's just their 5 minutes is like 80 years to us. You know what I mean? Which makes me curious to like, have they ever given you like a map of the non-physical? Like, have they ever given you like maybe a brief tour of what that's like on the other side?
Yes, in a sense. A couple things come up as you're talking. One is that, this is not just a file or a download of information that I'm getting from spirit. I can feel a presence. There are emotions that come through. They wash through my physical body. All of a sudden, I want to cry. That's, whether it's just tremendous love that's coming through, that's flooding me, that's coming from a loved one, for example. And they've, as far as what they're doing and whether they're following us around, what they've shared with me is that no, they don't spend all day, following us around. Good news, all day long. They have better things to do. On the other hand, so there is a life and that continues. They have their own continued life in spirit, and they're often working with those, like doing their own healing in spirit, or they're working with those here in the physical to help something related to what they were interested in, be it science and engineering, or be it working with animals or children or teaching. It's always pretty much related to what they cared about here. So they have a role to play. And they've also shared that they can be multiple places at once. So they're not limited to, like, sometimes people here worry, am I taking something away from them by, asking them to be with me often? You're not. They are multidimensional. They can be in two places at once. The reality is we are in two places at once as well. There's, another aspect of us that's exists and is growing, and at the same time as we're having this physical experience, it's just, there's a bit of a veil. We're not always conscious of that. But everything we're doing to learn and grow here is serving our larger self and all aspects of us. And similarly, they continue to learn and grow in spirit. Sometimes spirit will show me the example of like books, and they'll say, I'm really learning here. This is what I'm working on. So, but at the same time, any and every time that you call upon, be it your guides, your angels, or your loved ones for support or assistance, they're right here. There's like a little light, goes out, and they can read that instantly just through our intention, our energy, and the alignment of our energy. And they're always here for us and supporting us and guiding us. The more that we foster that connection and directly ask for that assistance, the more that we can feel that, register that, and they're just saying, spirit, they can get their hands in here, get their hands dirty.
Do you have these conversations at school pickup?
I don't do school pickup anymore. I have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old, so my son's driving himself to school. But what used to happen at school pickup is that I'd be doing sessions, and then there are always echoes of what had come through in those sessions at school pickup. So if I wasn't consciously having, which I generally wasn't, these conversations with other people, there was a continued conversation going on. So something that had come through in that session, that reading, would then be echoed. My son would pop out of school saying the exact same phrase that had just come through in a session, or even like a spirit who'd shown themselves to me in terms of physical characteristics, glasses and hair and beard or whatever. I would see someone just like that, and pick up all of a sudden that day. So there's always a conversation going on. I'm not generally, not interjecting that, or, trying to foster that with other people as much as unless someone asks for it, unless otherwise but it is a constant conversation for me all day long with spirit.
How did your husband evolve, like along with alongside of you, right? Like a lot of it can be an intimidating subject, as far as talking about consciousness and spirituality for some that have been, let's just face it, we have been initiated into a dogmatic religion, most of us. And so having these conversations is viewed upon as bad or sinful, right? And I'm not saying your husband was indoctrinated into that. I'm just saying, my experience, a lot of people that I have moved through this life alongside have had these indoctrinations of religion, especially in Baltimore, where it's highly, I would say, Catholic, right? So having these conversations isn't necessarily welcoming, or welcomed. So it's like I enjoy it because it just allows me to put down those closed off belief systems for a moment and really be open to a different way of being, a different reality almost of the possibilities. Like if we can connect with someone else's consciousness in the non-physical and bring forth evidence that validates that information, like what else is there? And I'm recently reading about remote viewing, and John McGonigal, I'm probably saying that name wrong, but he was like remote viewer 001 for CIA secret Stargate program. Actually a huge contributor to the Monroe Institute. He's actually the guy that I was referring to that got out of the shower and saw the Native American walking down the hall. But his story inspires me because he came from the army background and got into this type of psychic work and was able to kind of strengthen that innate ability to connect with different realities or dimensions and get information and connect with the quantum field, if you want to call it that, or whatever, and bring forth information that saved lives, that was able to help missing children, families heal, and things of that nature. So to me, that isn't a negative. I mean, I'm sure you can use it in a negative way, but for me, it's like, man, if we can develop this type of ability to create the goodness in the world, like why aren't we developing this skill more, right? Why aren't we teaching this to children and at pre-K, kindergarten levels, and helping them evolve and develop this ability? I mean, how can it help us as a society or civilization save the world as far as like, upgrading our technology, our farming systems, our with overpopulation? Like, how can we like make this world habitable for all of us and different, but still keep that diversity? Like these are just methods that we look at and scoff at because it doesn't fit a mold of our belief systems, an old outdated mold of belief systems that probably were influenced or manipulated to begin with to keep us from this information, which is highly frustrating for me. And I'm going down a rant, but I'm wrapping it back up in that and asking you this, like, if you were to help someone evolve their skill as a medium, or even like tiptoe in the water of mediumship, like how would you guide them down this path if they feel like they have this innate ability to connect? I mean, I think we all do, but if someone's curious to this work, how would you guide them?
I would say that the first place to focus is on getting present in yourself and doing your own work, because we can only be as clear of a channel as at some point. We can only be as clear as a channel as we have done the work for ourselves. So all of our old stories and patterns and illusions of limitation keep us from accessing our ability to our connection with, it's hard, this is where words fail, with our larger aspect. We're always connected with that larger aspect, but we have these filters of our belief systems. We have these old traumas and patterns that create kind of like, I'm seeing it like a cloudy lens, we're seeing through those as we experience reality. So to open up to the larger reality, it's really helpful, the greater reality, to clear a lot of that out. And that life presents us with that opportunity every single day. Every place where we feel negative emotion, where we feel stuck, where we feel tension in a relationship, where we're coming up against quote unquote issues for ourselves, is that place for healing, is that place to go into the origin point of what's coming up for us and do the work. And as we do that, and this is what I did after I said, may I be a blessing, put me in if I can be of assistance. Spirit compelled me to sit down, and every single time there was something that came up in that way, I would sit with it. And I think the answer is, it's to we access that larger part of ourselves and our connection with our larger non-physical aspect, the greater non-physical aspect, when we work against the default of pushing away, resisting, or trying to fix or change or deny the painful aspects, the shadow aspects of ourselves, the painful aspects of our reality, and how we experience life every day. So if instead we lean into those aspects with conscious awareness, we bring them into the light of awareness, and we welcome them, those parts of ourselves that we don't want to see, those emotions, those thoughts that are painful, we sit with them, we bring the light of our presence, which is our power, to them, and which is our connection to the non-physical, and that happens through our heart space, not through our heads, then those patterns can begin to let go. They can begin to dissolve. They can begin to release. And as you know, Trey, because we did a session together, what's happened for me in the last couple of years is that I register when I'm working with someone, for example, I register those shifts, those releases energetically in my physical body. It comes out as a burp. Generally, the bigger the release, the bigger the burp. Sometimes a sneeze. If it's just kind of some low level clearing, it's just, coming up in my throat that has to be cleared. But that now happens in my waking life, even if I'm just taking a walk by myself and I start to think about something, or something comes into my awareness that is difficult, or that was traumatic, or that there's some tension or some contraction around my energetic body, out comes the burp, because the minute I bring it into the light of awareness, it's getting released, it's getting moved, it's getting shifted. So when we can begin to live our lives that way, in one way or another, we're consciously reaching for the resources, we're sitting with ourselves, we're making the intention to transmute or transform those painful densities in our field, in our experience, then the more our reality on the outside begins to shift, because our reality on the inside is shifting. That state of consciousness shifts, and our external reality reflects that. So I think the answer to your question for me is to start with yourself, and then from there, now you can hold that space for others. Now spirit can work through you. And this is a constant process. It's not a one and done. We don't get to that point and then okay, I got it. Now I'm a clear channel. They're layers, and it's always an evolution. And we wouldn't want it any other way, because that's the joy and the adventure and the satisfaction in life. The more we do that, the more we're allowing spirit, the soul aspect of us, the spirit aspect, the intelligence that it sounds like this author or this person who you're speaking of is tapping into, to work through us. And then the personality becomes a vehicle. The ego is still here, but isn't running the show. And spirit can then inspire us to, however we're being called to help or to serve, be it, robotics, or be it, being an inspirational speaker, or being a physician and work the way you work with your patients. There's just being someone who works the clerk at the grocery store, and just embodying more presence. The ripple effect of that is enormous. Spirit shows me that again and again. This is not about, earning the Nobel Peace Prize and that person is doing a better job than the clerk at the grocery store. It's about the embodied presence and the power of that presence. That presence gets more and more powerful the more and more we've let go of some of those filters, or allowed those to transmute and reclaim that power for ourselves, that can then go into the light of our awareness and our presence. And that, I think, is how we really change the world. And I'm hopeful, because I think that's what we're seeing in all of the discourse and the narrative out there, what's changing, those, as you said, those older forms of religion, like they may still have a place. And if it's still working for you, great. But there's something bigger being called for, something else, something more being asked for by all of us at some level. And we're seeing that show up in our reality now. And as a collective, then it gets easier and easier for people to access these abilities for themselves. Clear seeing, hearing, knowing, feeling, intuitive truth, because the more that all of us do it, the more we're adding to that collective, and there's a tipping point. And at which point it gets easier and easier for each of us to do it. It's kind of the, what is it? The monkey on the island effect. Like,
it's like the 100th
right?
monkey.
This monkey. Yeah. When one person's doing it over here, it doesn't matter if, they're separated in space and time by years or islands and miles. It's like there's a web of consciousness, which is registering that shift, and that impacts everyone.
That sounds like what, Ken Wilber's spiral dynamics. Have you ever heard of him?
I know him,
No?
but I'm not familiar with the spiral dynamics.
Or is it integral theory, where it's almost stage theory with consciousness? Like, how Piaget was, cognitive stages of development?
Yes.
I think Ken Wilber is similar, where it is, he's integrated, synthesized like thousands and thousands of theories of transpersonal psychology and created this integral theory. It's stage-like development for spirituality or consciousness. And to your point, like you go, I don't remember all the 9 different stages that he talks about, but there is a place for the old dogmatic religions, because it is a stepping stone in your road to development. Like you need to really progress in this way to be able to see, like once you become the thing, like you don't just discard it, you kind of include it in your development. So like when you go from how I was a fundamentalist at one point in my life, like that is still a part of me, but it's not who I choose to be. Like that is a part of my story. And so the next stage of development expands me to a certain perspective, but it also includes, it's me and that, it's me and this, included in the overall being of what Trey is, that whole idea concept of my perspective. Without it, I wouldn't have this perspective, like I you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think that's true in so many ways. Spirit's been showing me recently, this kind of concept, when I walk, I'm always talking with the non-physical and connecting in that way. Nature's a really great way to connect because there's no ego in nature. So it's easier to shift into a vibration that's conducive to receptivity and receiving from spirit. So I've been in the spring here. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the daffodils not far from Baltimore are blooming, and this last week or two. And I was noticing this phenomenon when I was walking that I'd never noticed before. I planted a lot of bulbs this fall, and the daffodils were shooting up, and I kept seeing these brown leaves around the stem of the daffodil, but not at the base. They're up, a foot high now. And it's like the daffodil had poked holes in the leaf. I would have thought that these brown leaves on the ground from seasons past would have been blown off, or by through the power of the daffodil shooting up and its life force moving forward. That you would think maybe there wasn't room for that. It would have overpowered the brown leaf. Instead, the daffodil is actively moving up directly through and keeping the brown leaf with it and growing and holding it with it. And what Spirit showed me is that, like, that's how we operate. That the brown leaf represents these old patterns or parts of our story or aspects of self. For you, with your fundamentalism, for example, or old religious belief systems, they come with. They aren't discarded. They aren't yesterday's news. We don't need to move past them or move forward despite them. They're part of our experience. And in this essence of us, this life force that's moving us forward, we need those experiences. They're the ground that creates the soil. That brown leaf creates the soil, literally, that allows the daffodil to grow forth. And then that, in all of this, us moving for the spirit in us moving forward with all of these experiences and bringing light to these patterns, that is our blossoming. That is how we blossom. It's part of it. It's not separate from it. I think so many times we think I have to get rid of these old parts of my history, or those are no longer me, or I have to, I've got to be kind all the time, or never get angry, or, those old patterns of lack have to go. That's really not how it works. Those create the soil for our growth. And on another walk before the daffodils was the snow. And I was walking and there were all these, I had walked maybe the day before in the snow on the side of the road of this field. And the next day I was walking and I saw my imprints, my boot prints in the snow, and they had melted a little bit. And if I can remember this, I was talking with Spirit about, regrets and some of these parts of our past, like you're speaking to. And Spirit said, those are look to the right. Those are like the imprints in the snow. And I said, well, what happens, eventually, because yes, there's a melting of those. And they said, you walk alongside those, right? You're not trying to get rid of them. You'll always walk alongside that old piece of your history or that old pattern. It's not a bad thing. And then eventually, the guide said, they melt into our common ground, into our humanity. That is exactly what connects us. It's not what we need to get rid of. It's that's what unites us. And we want to nurture, nourish, and encourage that, the soul aspect of us. The soul aspect of you is the part that says, I want more. I want to know more. I want to expand into more. So you're the daffodil, you're moving into this blossoming and you're taking that old history with you, but it's the desire for more, the life standing for love and full expression that's moving you up to your greatest potentials. Same, and you're blossoming. Does that resonate?
Yeah, that definitely resonates. It's beautiful. Wait, that's a great metaphor for our conversation. But to your, to kind of talk about the tipping point to that really accelerates that 100th monkey effect.
Yeah.
Is it allowing consciousness to do its thing? Do we have self-agency in that development? Is it, I'm trying to curate an article right now about, it's titled, I have not written anything. It's to be or not to be, because you hear about different spiritual teachings about how we should be here in this reality. Is it being self-empowered, self-agent, or being our self-agent in our spiritual development, or is it being more, allowing, instead of being proactive in life and taking it in charge of that, and really trying to, how do I put this, be self-motivated and self-guided, directed and towards different projects, goals, or successes? Is it more or less surrendering? I guess that's what it should be about. For me, the comparative article should be is it to surrender to the higher power of God, to allow you to live, right? It's the power of now, Eckhart Tolle talks about, not really allowing God to guide you throughout your day, or is it you being the proactive, I guess type A personality, or being the conscious creator in your development to where you are creating your reality? It's both ends of the spectrum, right? There are a lot of people, spiritual teachers, that talk about surrendering more to God, to allow that divine being, supreme being, to kind of allow that consciousness to come into you, to where you are now just operating from, I guess, self-transcendent or ego transcendent, not egocentric, if that makes sense. So what are your thoughts on that idea or concept?
I think the answer is both, that it's really important to have the striving and the desire, the inspiration in spirit is spirit moving through you. It's the drive of the daffodil to shoot up and blossom. It's we're wired to some extent to have desires, to be inspired, to but it's when we get our hands too wrapped around the steering wheel and we're trying to control where we're headed too tightly, that's the striving and the trying, and that's very effortful, and that is where we begin to get in our own way. I would say the thinking mind is dominant, the ego is dominant. So it's important as we're wanting, say, spiritual development, or goals that we have, it's important to check in with the why. I think, why do we want these things? Is it truly inspired, or is it coming from a place of fear, lack, or insecurity? The identity, looking to fulfill the identity, the sense of me that's secure in the world. We'll never get there. That's a losing game. But so that's the ego part. But I do think that, if we can discern between that part and the part of us that just says like, ooh, I don't know why I'm drawn towards this, but boy, I love reading spiritual things. Boy, I love, teaching kids. Boy, I love, problem solving and just, innovating, whatever it is that's your reason. And part of your reason, we have many reasons for being here and purposes, but part of your purpose for being here, that is there's a part of that's you and your wiring, but that's also spirit working through you. You're here for a reason. And that's how spirit is encouraging you to move towards that purpose work. And we're co-creating. It's both. And at a certain point, if we're gripping the steering wheel too tightly, it is very important to bring in the aspect of surrender. That's a key to manifestation, my experience, and working with so many people in that regard, that it's important to get clarity around the essence of your desire and the why of it. And I'll tell you, here's a hint, that the larger your why, the more your why serves the greater good, the more powerful it is. And the easier it is to manifest in many ways, the more, direct support I tend to feel in my own endeavors in that way. And so we're moving in that direction. We're being inspired by spirit, and then we surrender. We say, may thy will be done. May this serve the highest and best for all concerned. And that's where, as I said, things get really powerful. You're always having support in creating this reality. We're wired to be inclined towards certain things because that's what we're here to do. And it's a combination effort.
I love that. So purpose versus experience. Like you believe that we are here for a purpose, not just to experience this reality, right? Like this life, this reality is a school, or I guess maybe some type of accelerator or whatever for the soul, incubator for the soul to develop and I guess evolve consciously. So how do past lives affect that, right? Like, I saw on your website, you do past life readings. So when Betsy comes into this role, into this life, right? Like, what is your purpose? Like, have you had previous past lives that help you create and cultivate this ability, this sensitivity? What did that look like? And then moving forward, like, what's the purpose, right, of evolution of consciousness? Is it to go back to the one? Is it to be an equal to that one and create its own universes? And then, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I hear a couple different questions.
There's a lot in there.
Let's see if we can break it down. In terms of purpose work, I think that our human self, our mind is kind of like a dog with a bone, and the mind is like, tell me what my purpose is. Give me the bone. Like, I just then I'll feel better. Then I'll feel secure. Then I'll know I'm on the right track. So it's kind of a trap. The mind it reduces things to our experience here to a singular purpose. That's almost always, when people think of it, on the external side, right? It's something we're doing. So I would clarify first that I think there are several layers and levels of purpose work. One is, say it's a vocation, right? It's being a parent, or it's our job. And so that can be a level of purpose. At a deeper level, we have a common purpose to embody our soul aspect, to be the presence of love. And that is what's ultimately going to, I believe, and from my perspective, working with spirit, is going to evolve us in the best way and the fastest way. So and we have lots, again, of what from the human perspective might look like little purposes, they're actually huge. How we show up, how we listen to someone else, how we interact with those every day. That can be in the email we send or the person we encounter. Those being the presence of love, being the presence of kindness, being the presence of stability, being the presence of strength. Those are all purpose work in those moments. Sometimes, often, our conflicts, our challenges can also be part of our purpose, right? We have say we're here to be a lightning rod for someone else, and that can look fiery, it can look messy, it can look uncomfortable, but that can be part of our purpose and our role we're playing. And I think past lives come in because we are, from my perspective, working on lessons and learnings while we're here to grow and evolve at the soul level. And that's always more important than the thing that we think is important. Like, oh, I'm feeling stuck because I'm between jobs, or this relationship I've been in for 20 years doesn't feel like it's working anymore. Or we tend to focus on the 3D aspect of our lives, but those are always pointing towards those places where we feel stuck, or we feel inspired, or we feel desires, are always pointing towards a larger soul inspiration and goal, how our soul wants to grow and evolve. So past lives, we don't come in as a blank slate. We come in, from my perspective, because I see past lives or parallel lives, whatever you want to call them, every day. We come in with residual energies and patternings from those past lives. And so whatever lessons or learnings we gained in that lifetime, we may want to grow further or take to the next level in this lifetime. And those can be part of our purpose work for sure. They dovetail. Past lives are really, I think, amazing because they give us so much context for what we're experiencing. It's why I love it. It's like we're down here like commando crawling on the ground. Like, this is all I see. This is my level of understanding. And then from past lives, we can say like, oh my God, no, there's a whole forest here. There's a whole jungle. I can understand the context in which this is happening. And it makes so much sense why I'm in conflict in this relationship, or why that job didn't work out. And it's fun, past lives, because often there will be like physical life validations of those past lives. So if I was working with a mom the other day, and she was asking about her son, and I said, well, there's a past life coming in here, if you're open to those. She said yes. And I said, I forgot what we were talking about for him, but I said he had a past life. He's in Australia. He was surfing, like he was taken under. It's like how he lost his life. And I saw that, there was a fear around like a lot of those like big spiders that are in Australia. And she said that is so uncanny because he's terrified of spiders, and he talks nonstop about surfing and wanting to go to Australia. So it's like, that's the aspect of him looking for healing. Now, on another, so then it's about the healing. What's the learning? What's he working on this lifetime, and how does it connect to that past lifetime? So I think particularly in relationships, when we just have the ground level, but if we can see the bird's eye view of another lifetime in which we were in a different kind of relationship with this person and what went on there, then often we can have a lot more compassion and understanding, which enables us to, hold that conflict differently with that person, or that rub, that tension, with a lot more understanding.
I love that. Yeah. Past lives are just so fascinating to me because, there's no way to validate it, right? You can't falsify it, but if you resonate with it, right, take what you can, or take what you need from that and move forward. I want to ask you an important question. As far as like your inner states of being, how they create your reality, like, how do you translate that, right? Like, you talk about relationships a lot, right? Like, I've been in this relationship for 20 years and I feel like it's deteriorating, or there's a lot of negativities associated with that. But I find that there's a reason, is because your internal states are reflecting that out into your reality. So how do you know, like, how do you see evidence that your inner state, like, how do you know that you're creating, like, is it, I get it. The world, the universe is unpredictable. It can be chaotic. There is chaos in this world. There is entropy. How do you see for yourself when you are positively, I guess maybe moving the needle on your inner states into a more, I guess, how do I say this? resonant vibe instead of chaos. You know what I mean? Like, so when my inner state is chaos, I feel like my reality is chaos. And when I can really cultivate more of a, like, activate heart space, heart center, then I can find more love in my reality, more love in my external states. So has that been the case for you? Like, I mean, obviously growing up with children, raising children, teaching kids, like, there is naturally chaos, right? I don't necessarily think that when my kids come home and they're letting go of that energy from being in school, that necessarily I have chaos inside of me. But when I look at different relationships externally, or interactions or things that are happening, my first question is, how am I creating this for myself? Like, what is going on within me that is reflecting this to me? Like, what do I need to work on? And I guess that's where the know thyself comes in, like, know thyself and why this is happening. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what has been evidence to you that your inner states do create your reality?
I love that question and this topic. Let's see where to begin. Absolutely, I agree that our states of consciousness are reflected in our reality, that there is an inextricable link, and we can't pull those two apart. Some examples of that are, one time I was on a plane and I was doing some inner work. This is how, just a reinforcement for how powerful our inner work is and how our inner experience gets reflected on the outside. I was on a plane, something had come up. As I said, I work with whatever comes up, any sort of negative feelings, or I don't even want to say negative, any feelings that cause tension or contraction. And I was going to the origin point for myself of where that comes from. And I went to a very young part of myself, a very young self, and started working with her to do the healing around that, just in my mind's eye, close my eyes and saw that work. And when I saw her, did the work with her, I asked her what she needed. And that young aspect of self showed me this big teddy bear. And she just put her arms around this teddy bear, giant teddy bear, bigger than her. And I could feel the shift and the change for me in that inner state. And the awareness, because there had been greater awareness that had been brought to, whatever was happening in my surface reality that was causing tension or contraction. Go to the healing, it happens, get out of the plane, and I'm sitting in one of those restaurants that's open to the airport, and I'm still in, often in sort of a liminal state, one foot in the physical world, one foot in the spirit world. And I look to my right, my attention gets snagged, pulled over to the right, and there's this little girl, and she has a teddy bear bigger than her with her arms wrapped around the whole thing, just like this, exactly like I just seen. So that was just a beautiful way, a very clear way, direct way that our inner experiences was being shown to me, exactly this lesson that you're talking about, this learning that it is always being reflected back to us. So even when we don't have something as direct or tangible as that to point to, it's happening. And I was recently, it's funny because I used to receive tons of communication with spirit through like license plates and, songs on the radio and things on the outside, whatever shows up in the store when I get there. But I moved further out of town about 3 years ago. And I'm pretty happy here in nature and in the peace. I don't go into town as much. So now spirit has to work a little harder to get things to me or in a different way. And of course they do, through my computer, through my emails and what comes in my inbox, and through my relationship with nature, these walks. And I had been in an agitated state of consciousness in which there'd been momentum that had, my human aspect was getting all riled up, and one thing after the next was irritating me. And now this, now that, and I can laugh, we can laugh at ourselves, but this is what happens to us, all of us, and not immune to that. So I was all fired up and I walked outside and there was a dead mouse, bam, right in front of me, right outside the steps. I'd never seen a live or a dead mouse here. It was just kind of shocking to see this dead mouse randomly in the yard lying on its side. And I was like, okay, spirit, like I gotcha. Like this is getting intense. What's this all about? So I walked down the hill, down the driveway, and my awareness gets snagged right in front of me. And I don't know what this was, Trey. I think maybe a piece of bark or something, but it was in exactly on the ground. My attention gets snagged down. I look down and this bark is exactly the shape. If you'd drawn an outline around that mouse on the ground, this was the piece of bark. Like I was looking at that again. And Spirit said, do you see like what you're holding for yourself? Your state of consciousness is determining what you're seeing and what you're experiencing. Here's another direct reminder of that. And so I asked them, I said, I get it. How can I work with this? And so maybe this will be helpful for your listeners. Spirit said, okay, what's your state of consciousness been? How have you been holding things for yourself? And I said, oh, really irritated, really, really mad. And then everywhere I went, I saw more of that. I seemed to like, this is what happens, right? We all know how this momentum gets going. Like we're in the state and then we get the email that makes us mad or the phone call. Oh, I can't believe that. It just snowballs because we've got this energetic stance going. We've got this energetic alignment with frustration or resentment or anger. And that's a state of consciousness. And that then draws that unto itself. And the more we hold that, the longer we hold that, the more powerful it becomes. The world around us is just a reflection, just a mirror. It's always being held up to us that's reflecting that. So that's when we get the difficult person on the phone, when we make the phone call to the corporation or whatever it is. So, Spirit said, how are you holding this for yourself? I saw the irritation and they said, what's the learning here? The first thing to look at is what's the learning. And I realized, okay, like the learning is what I just described, that this is powerful, that this has a momentum of its own, and that I have the power to not be a victim in this situation and not move into victim consciousness, which is where we tend to go. Oh, everything's just happening to me. Instead, shift it to the much greater truth and reality, which is everything's happening for me, and say, what is this here to show me? What is this? How can I learn from this? So I saw that snowball effect. And by the way, the team calls that the mouse effect, this phenomenon now that what we're holding for ourselves, we're seeing for ourselves again and again and again, reinforcing for ourselves. So this snowball effect, this mouse effect happens. And then they said, how could you hold this differently for yourself? Okay. One of the things I've been irritated with, it sounds funny, is that I have this huge holly hedge and all these plantings and the deer had just mowed it down. They had gotten hungry and from, head height down, deer head to head, it was demolished. And so I said, well, right. I can remember that I'm really, really, really thrilled to live in the country. And I'm so grateful. I get to live with these animals. And they said, okay, what's the gift in this? What can you be grateful for? That I get to live amongst cow and deer and horses and bunnies and foxes and dogs. And that is a source of great joy every day for me. So how we talk to ourselves, the story we hold for ourselves, completely determines our experience. If I hadn't shifted, as soon as I shifted that, I didn't get any more dead mice. I didn't get any more reasons to be irritated or upset. And this is key, is how those emotions are going to come up, those frustrations, those resentments, those angers. It's how we relate to them that makes the difference. Are we so closely identified with them, putting my hand to my nose right now, that we can't see beyond that? Or can we pull back and find a degree of spaciousness and spacious awareness, the essence of who we are, that allows us to see the dead mouse or the mowed down hedge and relate to it from a different space of, I can see the frustration and I can hold the appreciation for the learnings and the gift that's in this for me. That is a very different energetic place to be. And now we're shifting what we're receiving and what's going to be matched. And that's powerful work that we can do every single day for ourselves to shift our state of consciousness, which can shift our reality. The other part of shifting our reality is what we just illustrated there is, where are we not in alignment with what we're wanting to create in our lives, right? So the emotions that we hold that are way down here, a lower vibration, are not in alignment with up here. The much higher levels is where everything that we want exists. So there's a gap. How do we close the gap? Well, it's our emotions. The energetic intelligence of our heart is huge. The electromagnetic field around our heart is 5,000 times greater when the Heart Math Institute studies it than that of our head. So when we use our heart, when we shift into gratitude, or into seeing the gift, or into appreciation, we've shifted our state of consciousness. We've shifted what's going to get mirrored back for us. So where are we not in alignment is important to look at. And then how can we cultivate alignment with what we're looking to create for ourselves? And we can do that through calling up, conjuring for ourselves experiences, memories where we have felt excited, or, like if the essence of what we want is, say it's freedom in our lives, like we want to, like that relationship of 20 years, you give the example, is feeling stale, and we want a sense of greater freedom. Where do I already feel a sense of greater freedom in my life? Where do I actually feel that in that relationship? Because it's not all lack of freedom, right? Where can I see that? Can I beat the drum of that rather than the lack of freedom? Because what we do is we get stuck in this lower vibration, the state of consciousness, which only starts to feels lack, only starts to see lack. So then we only experience lack, right? So if we beat the drum of what's working in our lives, and where we already feel the essence of what we want, we can use anything as our excuse to do that. I could use this glass of water and say, like, the freedom of like drinking clean water every day. What a miracle. I've been in developing countries where that's not the case. Lived there. So we start to beat the drum of that, because if we have these desires or intentions for ourselves to change that relationship, for example, but we keep ourselves stuck in the same energetic state, then the energetic state is like tethers. It's holding us in place. We can say mantras, we can speak affirmations all day long. It's not going to get us there if what we're broadcasting from our energetic electromagnetic field is something very different.
I love all of that. So I feel like the commonality here in today's society, the zeitgeist, is more freedom, right? Like everybody wants freedom. Now, is that coming from a privileged standpoint, like where we're on top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs of self-actualization, or is that all the way down, right? Like, is it the human condition to want freedom, right? Because I feel like we're all being suppressed in some sense, right? So, like, do we ever really achieve freedom? Or is that like interstate? You know what I mean?
I think all of the above. The desire for freedom is hardwired into us because it's part of our spirit. It's a quality of spirit. And the places where there's repression or suppression in our culture are really rising to the surface to be transmuted and transformed. That's why we're seeing all of this upheaval and these forms of repression and pain points in our culture or other cultures around the world, politics, religion, economics, because they are asking for healing and transformation. And the basic nature of our soul is it's the daffodil moving towards the light. It's wanting to blossom and to thrive. And that's our birthright. And we want that to be there because it's what creates all of the transformation and evolution in ourselves and and as a ripple effect, our culture, our reality.
I love that answer. So I'm going to ask you one last question. I know you live in the country with the animals and the bees and the birds and all the things. But if you're looking at society as a whole at the macro level, like where are we headed for 2025, right? Or 2026, 2027? Like what are your insights? What is the information you're getting from, spirit as far as what our path looks like? If it's, one, I think reality is created in each moment by our decisions, right? Where are we headed? I think you can definitely see a difference. I can definitely see a difference from today as opposed to my childhood. It was totally different. But for you, what are the guides? What are your spirits saying? What direction we're headed in, and like what to expect?
Okay. This is a theme that's been coming through lately, is that our reality is created by our decisions. Two ways that Spirit's shown this from the beginning. They've shown me that, life is a choose your own adventure story. Did you ever read those books as a kid?
No.
It was a thing. Okay. They're the nature of the book was that you read a page or a couple pages, and then you have a choice. That character can make choice A or choice B. And if they make choice A, it says go to page 12. If they make choice B, it says go to page 41. And life is like that. We have these, these points where we can make one choice or another. And then if you went to page 41, there are going to be 2 different choices that spring off of that. If you went to page 12, 2 different choices, or 5 different choices that in the book, there are only 2, I think, but that spring off of that. And we have these kind of cairns along these paths, like along our paths, like when we're hiking, there's certain things that are relatively set in stone, is the way Spirit says it. And so we're working within those. And at the same time, we're making the choices. And that's the adventure of life. So that's the joy and that's the fun. And that's how we create our reality. But the other thing they've been showing recently is that each of these choices that we make are like a string of pearls. They string together, these small choices, these large choices and decisions, to create our reality, to create that necklace. And we never want to underestimate the power of each of those choices and the power of our intention. So the more conscious we can become, the more intentional we can become about our lives, and the larger our perspective, then the more powerful our path, because we have so much more agency and conscious sovereignty. And then we can make a bigger impact, and we can, learn in the ways that we came forth to learn. We can do the things we came to do. We can be the things we came to be. So that's how we can be most impactful. And I think that's what we're seeing in our culture, is people becoming more and more conscious. And so having the ability to do this. But let me just ask Spirit now towards your question, answer your question about 2025 and where we're headed. I wrote that down, so I didn't lose it. Let me see what they can show about that. Okay, so they're showing a sandbox. It's like a preschool sandbox, and they're showing, sometimes they do this in preschools. I used to be a teacher, where, they hide treasures in the sand, and then the kids dig for them. And so they're showing one of these treasure boxes, this sandbox, looks like a sandbox. And they're saying life is like this, life is, it requires some digging to reach the treasure for ourselves. These gems, these, they would put in the plastic dinosaurs and the gemstones and all of these special rocks and geodes and things in the sandbox, and the plastic trinkets. And so Spirit's saying, we have to do some digging to realize those treasures. And that's on an individual level, of course, is how we do that. And it's on a collective level. It's on a larger level, micro and the macro. So the more that we're doing the deep diving, the heavy digging for ourselves, we're looking for those treasures, just like I described. We're finding ourselves off balance, out of alignment. We're irritated, we're frustrated, we're seeing, from a lower perspective, just strictly through human goggles. The opportunity is always there to dig further, to dig deeper, and to find the larger perspective, the more expanded perspective. And that's the treasure. That's the gift that's available to us. So when we do that on a personal level, like the 100th monkey effect we talked about, we're also doing that at the very same time on a collective level. And we each have a role to play. Where you feel called, where you feel moved, where you feel inspired is telling you about that role that you have to play. You're wired for making a difference. You're wired for being part of the change at this incredibly beautiful, precious, powerful precipice of a time, in their words. And, a lot of the chaos that we're seeing, you spoke to the chaos, a lot of the chaos that we're seeing is the world, they're saying, doing a lot of deep digging. And if they're saying, the guys are funny, they're saying, if you've ever seen kids in this game, there's a lot of sand flying. It's a total mess. You're getting hit in the eye, it hurts, like that it's grit, it's painful, it's messy, and it looks disorderly. But ultimately, there are all of these treasures for each of us to unearth, much like, and this is an analogy they've been using in the last week too, the grit and the pearl, and they're bringing this in now. The sand also represents the way in which it's important that we cultivate through this experience of the chaos and navigating these chaotic times and these pressure-filled times, that we develop the grit and the perseverance and the stamina and the strength and the wisdom and the heart-centered perspective and the love to weather these storms and these tides. And through that process, that's how the pearl gets formed. The pearl starts as the grain of sand. And so what starts as an irritant or something that's really bothering us about our experience on the personal level or the collective level right now, has the potential to become the pearl of wisdom, has the potential to become the string of pearls, the collective wisdom of our times. And your team is just smiling and giving me a sense of like a warm smile in the heart and just saying, keep digging, keep working at it. It's worth the effort.
My team? Did you say my team?
Your team, my team, the larger
Okay.
team. They're all here because your superior self is here. Mine is here. The guides are here. It's like the minute you and I connect and we make this intention to have this conversation, they just said it's a party. Everybody wants to be a part of this conversation. And these conversations that are on the leading edge of consciousness are really important to moving the collective forward in a positive way. So they're saying, yes, you have agency. Yes, you have all of us have a clear role to play. So the more that we're cultivating these kinds of conversations and they can inform the larger discourse, the longer the string of pearls.
So now I'm curious because I have to ask this question. Sorry to keep you here longer, but I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Ask on.
So you talked about past life residual energy, right? And since my team is here, I would really love to hear their insight on like what am I carrying from my most recent past life and what residual energy I'm carrying into this. How do I synergize that, in pursuing my purpose here in life? Is it to, hopefully it's positive energy, right? That is helping me and empowering me to move forward with my purpose. And not some more trauma, but what are your thoughts and what do they say?
So what they're first saying as you're talking is that it's helpful to frame this instead of as your most recent past life, instead to ask what, the most relevant or, helpful past life, salient past life to your question, because it may not necessarily be your most recent past life, right? It's not necessarily a linear, what they're pointing to is it's not necessarily a linear building. So let's ask, it sounds like what you're asking is the past life that's most relevant to like your work
purpose here, right? Yeah. Work here, purpose. Yeah.
Let's ask that. Let's see what they can share around that. Okay, they're showing, first of all, a pattern of past lives where you've done a lot of heavy lifting, so to speak. You've, worked with, I'm asking what they mean by that. They're saying worked with a lot of groups, worked both as part of the group, but also heading up the group. We've played different roles in the group. So a lot of your work here in this lifetime and around like this podcast, for example, or YouTube channel that you're working on has to do with how you work in groups and finding the balance for yourself between being a vehicle for change and being a mouthpiece, a megaphone for change. You put what happens in a megaphone, they brought this up before, you put a little bit in, bigger, something comes out. Finding the balance for yourself between not holding too much weight of responsibility or everyone else's experiences or feeling too responsible for everybody else's experiences, the balance between that and serving the larger good, because that's a theme you've worked on in other lifetimes. And sometimes they said, sometimes you were the nail, sometimes you're the hammer, and sometimes you were the nail. So you've been on both sides of this equation, where you felt like somebody else has had too much power, and you've been on the side where you felt like, you were that person who had too much power. You had too little power. You were that person who had too little power. So you've seen it. You've spent a lot of lifetimes looking at this from every angle. And so your role in this lifetime is to embody that sense of balance where you are speaking with and for the group, but not from an egoic place, from a place of serving and allowing spirit to work through you, to move you, to inspire you towards not only your greatest good, but the highest and best of all concerned. Okay, that's the first thing that's coming through. Let's see what else is helpful or healing for you to know, Trey. Okay, they're showing, this is interesting. They're showing, how do I say this? I see a mother figure, and they're talking about your relationship. This is kind of far out there, but your relationship to the mother energy, like the feminine energy, and specifically the mother energy, this energy, which is the energy of like nurturing, nourishing, life sustaining, life enhancing energy. So, and it is in a sense a more feminine, we could say. I sort of don't love to use that word, but that's the way it's traditionally used. Masculine, feminine energies, the more feminine energies, it's about your relationship to that energy and embodying more of that nurturing and nourishing energy. And that is, in your purpose work. So finding the balance between the feminine and the masculine, but you've done a lot of the masculine in past lives. You chopped a lot of wood, you person of a lot of action. So they're now saying, it's your relationship with this more feminine or mother-like nurturing energy. And that's on a personal level. And it's also on a larger, your work level.
Mm. I love all that. Yeah, I feel like that's like a recurring theme is like the balancing aspect of my life. It's always been um, hard to balance just because of to your point of that masculinity energy. For me anyway, it's always like go out and achieve, go out, succeed, go out and do the things as fast as I can. And I think that feminine energy for me has been more about patience and receptivity and creating that inner space, nurturing the inner space for me has been, in my opinion, that femininity of fertile ground, right? Like creating a womb of creativity. So that way I can be more of a mouthpiece for nurturing, for evolution, for, that not being that egocentric voice, but being a voice that is unique in my own experience and perspective from my background, like including all the things that I have been in my life, and then voicing, where I'm at on that path of like, hey, I'm right there with you. Like I've been a blue collar worker. I've been a blue collar guy. I've gone back to school. It's taken me a really long time to get my degree. And these are the lessons, this is, I've been that type A personality. I've been that, the jock. I've been all this, the bro, the gym rat, all the things that you would expect from a typical 41-year-old male from Southern Delaware. And yeah, this is my life perspective. This is where I'm at. And this, my interest in spirituality has, exponentially grown in a way that it's insatiable, that I'm finding. It's crazy to me. Like there is no commonality really. There are overarching commonalities at the whole, but then there's also like everybody has their own stories, like everybody, when I speak to so many different, I've had over 500 conversations with mystics, psychic mediums, spiritual teachers, gurus, whatever, however you want to label them.
Yeah.
And it's like some of them you can probably create maybe like 5 or 6 categories about what their philosophies are, but they're all different within that category. So that's what's fascinating to me is like, just like you see religions, that there's so many different religions and different belief systems, but they all have their own truths, going back to that spiral dynamics or integral theory. It's, they all have their place, in someone's stepping stones of evolution. So, that makes sense to me. It's about balancing all the different aspects of self and honoring them and not being ashamed of them. If that makes sense.
All come with, as we were talking about before, the analogy of the daffodil. And ultimately your team is just adding that is self-love. And that's the name of the game. Everything we're talking about, welcoming, accepting, acknowledging, honoring all of those parts of ourselves, our history, our personality, our emotions in a given moment, our different experiences in life are about integrating all of that. And so that, because that is the source of our wisdom. That's the essence of our wisdom.
I love that.
Yeah.
Betsy, this has been fantastic. How can people connect with you?
Thank you so much. People can connect with me through my website, just my name, www.betsygranville.com, or my Instagram account. I can't remember. I think it's _ Betsy Granville. That's how they can probably best connect with me.
This has been fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing this space and your time. Your most valuable asset is our time and energy, right? So thank you for sharing that here and speaking to my audience about your story and sharing yourself with them. I think it's been fascinating. Thank you.
It's truly my joy. Thank you for having me.